happy that Richard Newton could be with us today here from the Institute of Aquaculture at the University of Stirling, where he is a research fellow. He has been working extensively on driving circular economy principles in aquaculture food systems, which were the core focus of the GAIN project, as we will hear about more now. But he has also been working with other projects already over 20 years, and not only in Europe, but also in Asia and Africa, and where he has been conducting sustainability assessments to better understand and promote more efficient and also sustainable production. So if you can share your screen, Richard, and then we will move to your presentation shortly.
Great, thanks, Alexandra. Morning, everybody.
Morning. You have a nice Scottish background, I see.
Yeah, I'm working for my allotment, actually.
Well, it's always good to see parts of the area where people are coming from. So, okay, now we see a presentation.
That's not mine.
Ah, okay.
That's mine. Can you see that?
Yes, yes, yes. But not yet. If you can move to the, yes, now it's perfect. Thank you.
So I should start off by talking a little bit about GAIN. So GAIN finished in October last year, and the objectives of GAIN were to promote what we call eco-intensification, not just at the farm level, but throughout the value chain. So getting more from less, principally looking at kind of circular economy type principles. So we were very much looking at things like byproducts from the processing end. We also looking at precision aquaculture at the farming stage and better welfare to improve the efficiency of production throughout the value chain. So today, really, I want to talk about how we measured sustainability within the project, and principally using what we called the Eco-Intensification Sustainability Index. So when we were measuring the sustainability throughout the value chain, we wanted to have a comprehensive measure of the sustainability. We didn't just want to measure environmental sustainability, we also wanted to incorporate the economic and the social impacts as well within the assessment. And also, we were also aware of increasing attention being paid to welfare and the One Health kind of principles which were being applied to aquaculture. So incorporating welfare indicators into the assessment as well. And this, of course, poses us challenges in how we do this throughout the value chain, not just looking at what's happening at the farm level, but also through feed production and through to processing and beyond. And we also wanted to make sure that what we were doing was relevant at a regional level and had contextualization at a local and international level, and something that stakeholders and consumers could engage with. So we were also aware that with PEF going on, as we've heard from before, but also lots of initiatives from a lot of the certification agencies, we wanted to make sure that we were encompassing all of these different perceptions throughout what we were doing. So we wanted to make sure that all of the value chain actors were involved and that we could encourage traceability throughout the value chain. So our approach was very much similar to what's happening within the PEF. We wanted to use life cycle assessment as a framework for what we were doing, but we also wanted to incorporate aspects of value chain analysis. So the difference between those is that life cycle assessment measures accumulated environmental impacts throughout a supply chain, whereas value chain analysis explores relationships within a value chain, where the power and kind of power dynamics lay, where policy and governments affect decision making, how goods and services move throughout the value chain, where value is created within the value chain. and these kinds of aspects. So value chain analysis very much underpins a lot of the principles around socio-economic sustainability, whereas life cycle assessment is more about environmental sustainability. But they're connected, that's quite difficult to integrate together. So we started off with a process of engagement with different stakeholders and experts to develop the indicators that we wanted to incorporate within the index, starting off with a series of life cycle assessment type indicators that you see within the PEF, but then incorporating also more environmental indicators which are more pertinent to aquaculture, things like fish in, fish out ratios, which measure the efficient use of marine ingredients, for example. Also things like the chemical use at the sites, the benthic impacts and things like these, but then also incorporating into economic indicators, social indicators and welfare indicators. And we came up with quite an expansive list of these different indicators, but we were aware throughout that we were going to be collecting data from the industry. So we had certain caveats in terms of what indicators we could include. So first of all, we had to make sure that the indicators could be incorporated in terms of a value chain, or as far as possible within the value chain, so using the same kind of principles that we would use for life cycle assessment. But also we were aware that we were relying on what data was available from the industry, and we didn't want to ask them to collect more data for us, but we wanted to rely on data they already collected. So in the end, we had quite a large list of environmental indicators. Like this is kind of life cycle assessment type indicators for production of feed in Norway. And as you can see, these are kind of similar type life cycle assessment categories that we see global warming potential, but we started to separate things out a little bit more. We wanted to look at the difference between non-renewable energy and renewable energy. We wanted to separate the water out, which between blue and green water, blue being water which is abstracted and green water which is precipitation. We wanted to measure the use of marine ingredients, so we were able to incorporate fish in, fish out ratio as a life cycle assessment category, and biotic resource use as well, to measure the trade-offs between the marine ingredients use and the other type of environmental impacts categories. Also, we were able to incorporate some of these indicators from a kind of socioeconomic perspective as well. So some of these come from the processing. We looked at the different proportions of different co-products coming out of processing in terms of mass and value. We separated out the global warming potential for the processing of the raw materials, how much renewable energy was used at the processor compared to in the value chain, and non-renewable energy use. We looked at the employment ratios throughout the value chain. You can see it was quite an interesting result for us that actually there were more female people in the value chain overall per ton of product produced, most of it within the processing sector, whereas male employment is dominated within the grow out part. We also can see here we were able to measure mortality at different points within the value chain, at the grow out stage and within the hatchery, and then eutrophication, how much of that came from the feed and how much was at the farm level. This is a kind of example of the type of results that we were able to get. Then the challenge was to take all of these indicators and then to try and compile them into an index. So we used a stakeholder survey to try and gauge the perception of different environmental and other sustainability impacts. And then we used their perceptions to weight those impacts and the results that we got through the assessment, and then compile those into the index. So this gives you an idea, flavour of how different stakeholders rated different sustainability challenges within the industry in Norway. So carbon footprint and byproduct utilisation, benthic impact being the main ones, and fish in, fish out ratio, feed efficiency and energy consumption were the ones which came up strongest. Then when we took these results, we would then pile them into an index by assessing how much of the data that we got fell into these different categories, how much of it was poor, how much was borderline, how much was acceptable, and how much was excellent compared to this kind of framework based on data that we received, where the averages were lying, and also data from the literature, and then we applied the weightings to that to be able to compile that into an index. And in the end, it looked something like this. So we could see how much proportion of the industry was falling into the different categories within the different sustainability criteria. So typically we saw that a lot of farms are doing very well on welfare and social, but also there was a few bad apples, if you like, that didn't perform well on certain aspects. Same with environmental indicators, most fell somewhere in the middle with a few extremes either end. And the economic indicators, we saw that overall it was performing pretty well, which is what you would expect for a well-established growing industry such as Norwegian salmon industry. This just gives you a flavour of the type of sustainability index that we were applying, the assessment we were applying throughout the GAIN project. Unfortunately, due to COVID, half of the project was during COVID lockdown, we were only really able to do the work with the Norwegian salmon industry. We also intended to do this for Polish carp, and we also wanted to apply it to the Mediterranean species as well, but we were unable to travel to collect that data, and we only really had good data for Norway in the end. So in conclusion, we were able to construct these sustainability indices for a wide range of indicators, but we needed further industry validation. We ran out of time in the end. We validated the collection of the data, and we validated how different stakeholders perceived different sustainability challenges, but we were not able to validate in the end how the actual index was put together, because that came right at the end of the project. We would like to put it out to the industry and seeing what their thoughts were on how the index looked in the end and whether they felt we were in the right ballpark. We would also like to have the spread of indicators as well, and in the end it was still dominated by the environmental indicators, and that was because the data's there and it's easy to model and apply, and socioeconomic indicators much more difficult. The economic data is particularly difficult because it's so proprietary, and not many companies are willing to part with that. We'd like to apply it to more diverse production systems as well. Salmon's quite a uniform production system where everything's produced in pretty much the same way, but we don't see that when you look at things like the carp production and other production systems, especially outside of Europe. And we want to ensure that it's applicable and consistent, and its consistency to industry, to make sure that all of the indicators that we're using within one industry can be applied to other industries as well, so we have some kind of uniformity across the board. Going forward, we would probably like to try and develop this further and incorporate it into a tool system similar to we saw in the first presentation, but that's for future projects. So thank you for listening to me for that. Sorry if I'm a little bit choked up